Welcome back. Actually realized for my last basically 16 videos, I didn't plug in the headphone properly. I was actually using the computer sound to record my recording, so the actual quality was a bit weird, but I have now plugged in my headphone properly, and we should have better sound quality for the next 12 or so videos. So what I've done here is this is the dot point we covered today. Last time we covered the structure of arteries and veins and capillaries. Today we're going to talk about the this dot point, which says describe the main changes in the chemical composition of the blood as it moves around the body and identify the tissues in which these changes occur. So first again I need to go through that word tissues. What tissues is just a collection of cells. So tissue means lots of cells, and importantly it's the same type of cell. So if you have one cell, we call it a cell. But if we have lots of cells next to each other, all of them combined, these cells need to be the same. So for example, these are all muscle cells, and then we call it tissue. So tissue is just lots of cells close to each other. So before we go on, I want to make sure we cover, back to our last video, we talked about arteries, veins, and capillaries. So here we've got that picture, which is actually also one we're going to go through in terms of this dot point. But I just want to show again, arteries is the stuff that carries blood away from the heart. So this is the heart. Here's pumping away from the heart. So the red is, in this case, your red here is your artery. That's carrying blood away from the heart. Your vein, in most cases, it carries low oxygen blood back to the heart, deoxygenated blood. So vein here is back to the heart. And then we've got our capillaries, which are these web-like looking things here. These are, and this is where you have all that, the nutrients being exchanged, so material being exchanged from blood to cells. Just as a revision for last time, this is what I was talking about. We've got our arteries going away, our veins going to the heart, and our capillaries in between the areas to make sure we have all this material and the nutrients being exchanged. So let me talk about the actual dot point. So it talks about moving chemical composition changing from one area to the next. So how, in terms of what the blood changes its chemical composition. Chemical composition refers to just glucose, CO2, O2, all that stuff, how that changes when it moves to different areas. So first I talk about the tissues. So the tissue refers to, in this case, refers to the arm, leg, and head tissue, so muscle tissue or brain tissue. This would be these areas I'm highlighting here now, here or down there as well. So just areas that go to our active sites. Now what happens here, we've got the bloodstream. I've got a couple different things to label. So remember in the bloodstream we've got yellow things traveling. Yellow was, in this case, was glucose. The blue I usually take for oxygen. And inside the cell we have, when cellular respiration happens, we have something called CO2 being produced as a byproduct. Right? So remember this equation, cellular respiration. Glucose plus oxygen goes into carbon dioxide plus water plus ATP. So what actually happens when we're at the tissue level is glucose will go into cells. So glucose goes in, oxygen goes into cells because we need to have that for cellular respiration. But carbon dioxide, so that all that bad stuff, goes into our blood. So when we're talking about the change in composition, in blood composition, when we're at the tissue level, we have glucose and oxygen. Those two are needed by cells, so obviously they're going to go out of blood. So I'm going to draw a down arrow for meaning that we reduce our levels in the blood because it's gone into the cells. Whereas CO2, because it's a byproduct, which is not good, we don't need to have that. It goes from the cells into blood, so it has increased inside the blood. So these just refer to not what happens inside the cell, what happens in the blood. Right? So glucose leaves, oxygen leaves, and carbon dioxide goes in. Right, so that's for tissue, just for arm, leg, or head tissue. Next, I'm going to talk about the lungs. So remember this picture from a couple of videos back. This was the alveoli. and the alveoli obviously is the tissue of the lungs. Now we have a bloodstream passing through here. The blood is going in this direction. In the blood at the moment we have lots of these grey molecules. I usually use grey, not always, but usually for CO2. And again, the blue ones were obviously usually O2. So in this case we have oxygen going from the lungs. So we breathe in oxygen and then goes to the alveoli, and from there it's going to diffuse over into the blood vessels, right? So our blood is going to increase in O2 levels. And the good thing is lungs also act to decrease our CO2, because CO2 is going to diffuse the other way. It's going to go over to the other side. So CO2 is going to diffuse out. So again, when it comes to chemical composition, we're going to have oxygen increasing in our blood because it's gone into our blood from the alveoli, and CO2 decreasing because it's gone. We're going to breathe carbon dioxide out because we don't want to have it. It's a byproduct, a bad byproduct that's going to go down. It's kind of the reverse of what happens at the tissue. Next, we have the liver. So I talked earlier about how ammonia is a byproduct of protein breakdown, and ammonia goes into something called urea. So urea is a waste product. We don't want to have urea, but we have it because proteins break down and get recycled. So these are urea. And this brown thing is supposed to be a liver cell here, liver cell. And again, as the blood passes the liver, what happens is all these urea, because they're bad and they're produced by the liver, but we want to get rid of them. They go out into blood. So at the liver, you have urea levels increasing in our blood, right? This refers to what happens in our blood. So urea levels increase as we bypass the liver because it's being produced in the liver, and we want to get rid of urea eventually. So they'll go into blood and then to the kidneys later. Now, small intestine. We talked about small intestine and what the role of small intestine was in year 11, but it's basically just to break down the molecules of food into smaller bits. So, for example, yellow, I often use yellow for glucose. I often use purple for the amino acids. And this time I used the green for lipids or fats. So basically what happens is as the blood, so this here is the pink is the small intestine, and obviously usually I use red for the blood. So as the small intestine passes the area of the blood, what happens is all of these come over, all of these diffuse over. So we've got glucose coming over into the blood, we've got lipids and fats coming over, and amino acids coming over. So when it comes to the chemical composition, we have amino acids. I'm going to write A for amino acids, but that's meant to be amino acids. We've got glucose, and we've got lipids. And remember what happens to all of these in the blood? They will all increase as we move past, as blood moves past, not we, as blood moves past the small intestine. So all of these will increase because you're going to go from the small intestine into the blood. Last but not least, we have the kidneys, or the tissue of the kidneys is called a nephron. So if you haven't heard of nephron, you will hear about it very soon. Nephron is just the functional unit of the kidneys. And what happens here is we have the urea earlier being produced by the liver and going into blood. And once it actually passes the kidneys, what happens is this urea goes from the blood into the kidneys, where it's going to get filtered out and it's going to be removed as urine. So a yellow stream is meant to be urine. So urea will go into urine and then be removed. So as we pass the kidneys, what happens to urea is urea will decrease from our blood because it will go from our blood into the bloodstream, into the kidneys and then out of the body, right? So I'll go over each step again. We have at our tissue, arm, legs, and head tissue, our muscle tissue or our brain tissue, we have kind of drawn over that, okay? Glucose and oxygen going down, and the reason why they're going down from the blood is because they need to be used by the cells. And we have carbon dioxide increasing in the blood, and the reason why is because they're going to be used by cellular respiration. And then they can go into the blood because they're a byproduct and have to be removed by the lungs later. Right, so then to lungs. In the lungs we have oxygen increasing because we breathe in oxygen and then it goes into our blood through the alveoli. and we've got carbon dioxide decreasing, because carbon dioxide is a waste product, and in the lungs we can actually exhale them out. We can remove them through our breathing afterwards. So O2 increases, CO2 decreases. At the liver, we have urea increasing in our blood. Urea is a byproduct of, it's a nitrogenous waste. We don't want to have that, but we need to make it so we can remove it. So we remove it and make it in the liver and then put it into our bloodstream. At the kidney, that same urea we made in the liver and put into the bloodstream, we remove again. So now we remove it at the kidneys, and the kidneys will make it into urine, so that yellow stream was urine. And that urine will be removed by this by the duct and then urinated out. And last but not least, we've got small intestine. We've got amino acids, we've got glucose, and we've got lipids, and they will all increase in our blood because it will diffuse from our small intestine into our blood. So these levels will increase our small intestine. So just remember these 5 areas, and remember what's increasing, what's decreasing at each of these areas. It should be good. All right, so hopefully that was helpful.